Esau na Yaakov Maweled. You know, okay. Genesis 25, verse 24 to 26. It says, "And when her days," speaking of Ribkah, our ancestress and Hebrew matriarch Ribkah or Rebecca, "when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, look and see, Nahu, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red, all over like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Yaakov. And Yitzhak was 80 years old when she bare them." So Yitzhak, or Isaac, the grandfather, right? Isaac, are we speaking about Isaac? No, we're speaking about the father, Yikrita. The father is Abraham, and Abraham already ascended, we can say, by this time, or he went into the Duat, or we can say he descended, you know what I'm saying? In that sense, if you understand what we're speaking about here, we'll clarify hopefully as we go on. But Yitzhak was 60 years old, so around 40 years old he married Rebecca, and for about 20 years they did not have a seed. Now they have twins. Now you have to remember that Ribkah, our Hebrew Black, in other words, Hebrew matriarch, this daughter of Sarah, those daughters that did well, she had communication with Yahweh. She entreated Yahweh. She knew Yahweh in spirit and in truth, that she could ask concerning what is this that's going on in her womb, what is this that's going on in her belly. And Yahweh answered her, and we have that in verse 23 where it says, Yahweh said to her, Baruchu said, 2 nations are in thy womb, 2 nations and 2 manner, 2 type of people shall be separated from thy bowels. There would be one that would be stronger than the other people, and it says that the elder would serve the younger. Now there's a Haggadah tradition, this Jewish tradition, and in some of the, not just the European Jewish tradition, but in some of the Jewish and the Hebrew traditions, the stories which help to highlight, even in Talmud and other stories, and we find justification for some of the older traditions, you understand, especially from this part of Scripture, you understand, speaking of the foundation of Genesis, that says that when they were being born, the twins, that it was actually, this is where a whole idea of a scarlet thread. It's not biblical in the sense that it's not directly written in the Bible, but it may help to add some clarity to this, because here it just has like 3 lines concerning the birth. But there's much that needs to be known about these 2 twins, because according to what we have here, it would state that Esau came out first, and then Yaakov came out holding the heel of his brother. Now some say that when the 2 children were struggling, when it was time to be delivered, that it was Yaakov who stretched out his hand first, like to come out. You understand? His hand came out the womb, and one of the midwives, it said, tied a scarlet thread on that boy's hand. And this is said to be under the instruction of Rebecca because of what was communicated to her. Now, this that we have in verse 23 of chapter 25 of Genesis is only a summary. Perhaps there was more detail. And as we study Little Genesis and some of the Ethiopic scriptures that we also have and manuscripts, some of that will become much more clearer. But the whole scarlet thread issue is additional to what we have here in the Bible, but it's interesting because they said that that hand that came out, the thread, scarlet thread, was tied to Jacob's hand, but that because of the contending, he was pulled back in. And it was actually Esau that came out first. So when the babies came out, they saw that the scarlet thread was attached to the one that was holding the heel of the firstborn. Now, many must have mused and wondered on this. Now, what's interesting is that this has a lot to do with the teaching on the firstborn, because it would appear here that the chosen, according to the natural, the chosen, we speak about the Cherui, or the Horus, you understand, which is Ethiopically known as Cherui, and Cherui mean actually chosen and elect. So basically in Ethiopic and in ancient Kamite language, it has one and the same meaning, and the mythology, the mythos, one and the same. So it's important for us to recognize that Ethiopic, ancient Egypt, Kamite link, even in the linguistics, even in the language, that helps to further clarify some of these matters that have been so twisted and confused by the Gentile, Western Gentile mentality. Now, Esau would have been the firstborn, according to this. But then right after this particular chapter that concerns the birth of Esau and Yaakov, it states that there was a sale of the Bikurna. The Bikurna is the birthright. So there's a sale of the birthright. Now, there's a footnote here in the Schofield that we touched on, but we'll just touch on this again. It says that Esau stands for the mere man of the earth, or the natural man. It gives a reference to Hebrews 12, verses 16 and 17. In many respects, a nobler man, naturally, than Yaakov. He was destitute of faith. So it states that Esau, or Esau, in many respects, was a nobler man. In other words, he had that nobility and perhaps even a noble bearing by nature, naturally, than Yaakov did. But here's the point. He was destitute. He was poor in faith. Like some people may have a disposition, so forth and so on, but what is really there in the innermost of the inner, in his innocence, he did not have any imnet, he did not have any amen objectively, or imnet subjectively, and despised the bikurna, or the birthright, because it was a spiritual thing, and Esau was a natural man, and the spiritual thing was of value only as there was faith. So you see, the birthright was a spiritual thing. The birthright was not just who was so-called born or came out physically first, but is who is first in spirit and in truth. So the value of that spiritual thing, the bikurna, or the birthright, was only of value as there was the imnet, the faith, subjectively, and the amen objectively to apprehend it. Now this is very important that we make the connection with the birthright and the firstborn, that the one who is born first. You see, in the natural, see, there's two manners of people that were born from Ribka, and here in the mythos, the mythology, it's important to get a grasp of the teachings and the ideas and the examples of twins and the two brothers. We already have a couple examples already in the Metaf Kedus and in the Sabbatical studies, and we're only here at the 25th chapter of Genesis and the 6th Sabbath in this particular cycle, and we already have another example of the two brothers. You know, in ancient Egypt, the Kamite literature and the mythos, the mythology, has also a lot to say about the two brothers. There's a famous papyrus which is basically titled concerning the two brothers, and we would refer ones to just take a study of that. Very interesting. One will probably enjoy the reading as one seeks to understand and comprehend, well, what is the sense of this, spiritually speaking? Because naturally we can say, all right, somebody can read this and say, well, Esau was born first, so the birthright was his. And then you have the others that would say, no, but read on. He sold his birthright, according to the scriptures, for something to eat. Then we begin to think about this. Wow, ain't that something? a lot of ones and a lot of people, and maybe a lot of us, have done, or previously, hopefully before our rebirth, we did that already, and ones are doing that every day. They're selling their birthright, you understand, for something to eat. You understand? Because their birthright, where they were so-called born, of who they are born, means nothing to them. We have this with a lot of the careless Ethiopians. Many of the careless Ethiopians have sold their birthright for so-called American citizenship in the same sense as Esau or Esau for something to eat. So we are warned about that. It wasn't just the type of food he sold it for, but it's the point and it's the principle that he was willing, you understand, to sell it for something to eat, but afterward.
And when the Lamb opened the seventh seal, silence covered the sky.